Hello and welcome to the RBC Lunch and Learn series presented by the J. Herbert Smith Center. I'm your host, Jade, and I am so excited for you all to join us today. So today's guest is Sawyer Hannay. Sawyer is the CEO of Country Liberty, a successful clothing brand started right here on the East Coast. Sawyer launched Country Liberty while he was studying here in Fredericton, and since then has grown it to be a nationally recognized brand. A little more about Sawyer. Sawyer is from Rexton, New Brunswick. He is a former professional hockey player and most recently the founder of Country Liberty and Liberty Village. Before starting his entrepreneurial journey, he played amateur, professional, and university hockey in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Austria, QBC, and Indiana. He studied between St. Thomas University and UNB, gaining the insight and confidence to very softly launch his clothing brand during his time on campus. Country Liberty has become one of the largest East Coast brands while making waves across the country, as well as partnering with Molson, the Cavendish Beach Music Festival, CBC Dragon's Den, and more. So I'm going to bring Sawyer onto the stage right now. Hello, Sawyer. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey there. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. So Sawyer, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself there?
Sure. Yeah. So I am from a small town called Rexton here in New Brunswick. And I grew up here for most of my years until I was about 16. Well, just the tail end of my 16th year, I moved to Dartmouth, Nova Scotia for, as you mentioned, to play amateur hockey. I played for the Halifax Mooseheads there for a few years, and we played on both some, kind of weak teams and good teams. By the end of my days there in Halifax, I was playing with guys like Nathan McKinnon and Jonathan Drouin and Zach Fucali and a lot of real good hockey players there. And eventually, after playing, a few years in Halifax, I was drafted to the NHL. So when I was drafted to the Vancouver Canucks, it was 2010. Ironically, the same day I was drafted to the Canucks, I also graduated from high school. So it was kind of, a big day in our household. Pretty exciting. And that's really, I would say, Jade, where the journey really started for me, was when I got drafted. Well, I guess, first of all, when I left home, started to, kind of learn and adapt to different types of people, the different area. Again, I was from a small town moving to the city, but also I was playing with players from Europe, playing with players from all over Eastern Atlantic Canada and Quebec and things like that. So I gained a lot of perspective, I guess, I would say in those years. And from being drafted to the Canucks, they eventually, when I was 19, they sent me to Salzburg, Austria, Europe to develop. So between traveling to Canucks camps and meeting people from all over the world through that experience and skating and playing and working alongside, the world's best, and learning from them at such a young age. Matter of fact, the year I was drafted, I was the youngest player, just based on my birthday. I was the youngest player in the entire draft, just ironically. So, I was 17 when I started going to camps, but at 19, the Canucks development team sent me to Europe to develop. And Europe is a very key part of my story, because that's where I come up for the inspiration for this clothing brand, Country Liberty. I was living over in Europe. I was 19 years old. This is really before, I would say, the modern travel buzz. This is pre-Instagram. This is I think I had an iPhone 3 over there, so there wasn't much photography going on, in my world, at least, more of the traditional photography. And, I was over there to play hockey. I had a missing front tooth, long hair past my collarbones, where in Austria and many parts of Europe, as you know, is very, stylish and very non-rural New Brunswick, I would say, So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cultural things there that I had to adapt to as well, which, was challenging for a young kid. But one thing that the differences in culture between rural New Brunswick and rural Canada and Europe was, I grew really proud of those differences. I loved and respected and enjoyed my time there as well. But I really loved and thought a lot about home when I was there, and the things that I love about this place as well. And that's where this surge of inspiration came over me, was essentially with, I'm living in Europe, far away from home. I was playing professional hockey there at the time, but I also had lots of time to think and reflect. And I just, felt so proud of where I was from, and the types of people that I grew up with, and those things, and gaining so much perspective too, like just traveling around and hearing other people's stories, and just feeling really grateful that I was able to have the start to my life that I did, and within the environment and surrounded by the people that I had here in rural New Brunswick. And I knew that at that point, I wanted to represent that feeling somehow. But again, I was there playing hockey. That was my mission. So I stayed very much focused on that. After leaving Europe, it was actually the NHL lockout year. So things got really complicated. A lot of North American pro hockey players flooded, a lot of NHL players flooded to these European leagues, which essentially pushed me down the ladder in the depth chart. So eventually I left and finished my major junior career in Quebec. And then from there, Vancouver again connected me with an American League team, the Chicago Wolves. So I went to their training camp and I ended up signing an American League contract with those guys out of camp. They sent me to the East Coast League in Indiana, where I played for just about 4 months. And it was within those 4 months that I decided to pivot, realizing how many great athletes and great hockey players and things there were out there in the world, and just realizing my own ambition, I wanted more for my life than just playing in the East Coast League, maybe playing some American League games, not really sure what the outcome was. I was having some real conversations with myself about the NHL, and just realizing, that there's a lot of players out there competing for very limited spots. I reflected on my skill set, and I knew that it was a bit of a long shot for me to make it, in hindsight. So I decided to pivot from professional hockey and move back to Fredericton, to St. Thomas, where I then, started my academic journey here in Fredericton. And I, played for the Stu Tommy's program before the program had closed, and we got beat up on by UNB. Seems like every single time, but it was a lot of fun. And I actually hung out with a lot of the UNB hockey guys and a lot of UNB students just in general, having the campuses so close. I really enjoyed my campus and university experience in Fredericton. And, I started school when I was just 21, because again, I was playing pro from 19 to 21 off and on. So I got a bit of a late start, to school. But when I got there, I said, I'm here. I want to put in the work. I want to accelerate this degree as best I can so that I'm younger on the other end, and maybe can play pro hockey again. Because as we know in athletics, kind of the younger you are, the more opportunity there is, right? So I accelerated my degree. I finished in 2.5 years by taking online courses, intersession, summer session, all those types of things, just to graduate when I could. But what I didn't realize was this passion that I had summoned, I guess, back in my European days for this want to represent where I was from. It was still existing very much within me. And after traveling from Quebec to Nova Scotia to Indiana to Europe to all these places, I recognize, hey, I'm in Fredericton for the duration of a degree at least. So I'm here for 3 to 4 years, give or take. So I said, if I was ever going to start a passion project, it would be while I was, attending university, because I know I can't get traded like in the hockey world, or I can't get cut or sent down or called up or any of those things that happen in the athletic world. I knew I was there for 2 to 4 years for sure. So I contacted a real good buddy of mine, and him and I basically spilled my idea to him, and I just said, I want to represent this passion, and I think that clothing isn't necessarily the best way to do it, but probably the easiest, and it's kind of ironic now that I'm in the clothing business, because this was an idea, and the clothing was simply the carrier for the idea. It was the carrier for the message, versus me having a passion about clothing and then wanting to come up with an idea to pair with the clothing. It was the other way around. I had the idea and the inspiration and the motivation to represent what I loved. And I just recognized clothing as a fairly easy way to convey that message, because we wear the things that we're proud of.
Mm.
Whether that be a Roots T-shirt with a Canadian flag on it, or whether that be, it could be anything. We very generally wear what we're proud of, and it's a way of showcasing our personality, by choosing our outfits and things like that as well. So I decided, hey, let's just print a couple T-shirts. We put in $200 each, $400, which I'm really proud to say that to date, that's all that I've invested in this business was my original $200.
Wow.
Yeah. So we bought a design, the design that everybody knows, the one that you're wearing now. That cost us, $180, I think, at the time. We spent the rest of the money on just printing T-shirts. We printed 12 T-shirts, sold them to friends and family for $20 each. The little bit of revenue, that you generated off those, because we kept one each, so we sold 10 T-shirts, and the money that we generated from that, we just started kind of ordering. We ordered 50 tank tops. We ordered, maybe 50 hoodies or so, 150 hats. I remember very vividly, 144 hats. Very vividly, our first summer is what we ordered. I remember being like, a little concerned that we were investing all of our money into, a single SKU, which seems silly now. But at the time, it was a big deal. And I just started selling around campus, started selling just for fun. And again, it was still a passion project. It wasn't a business to me. It was just something fun to do on the side. Our hopes were to break even and just have a cool experience. That was kind of the ambition. Started kind of slinging T-shirts out of a spare bedroom at my apartment, out of the trunk of my car, just meeting people on campus. Started a little Facebook and Instagram page just to kind of, I guess, create a little bit of awareness. And people would contact me through that, and we'd meet up at my apartment. I used to have a notebook, pen and paper, and I just write down people's names and what they wanted and when I thought that they would come. And, just a super old school way of meeting and connecting with people that way. And then, I graduated university, and I was at a crossroads because, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to, accelerate my degree in hopes of playing professional hockey again, younger, right? And that was the whole goal. But what I didn't realize was I started to really enjoy the kind of the business side of this, of selling T-shirts and things like that. And I've seen the business side of hockey, specifically professional hockey, but even major, junior. And there was a lot I didn't like about it. The job security was minimal. The longevity was always questioned. You're always one injury away from never playing again. And I remember reflecting on some pro guys that I played with that were older, quite a bit older than me, in their early 30s, which in the athletic world is, getting older. If you ask me now if I thought early 30s was old, I would say no, because I'm quickly approaching. But, back then, if you were early 30s, you were an older hockey player. And I remember reflecting on their lives and just knowing, the injuries that they've gone through and their need to play through injuries. Otherwise, they can't, feed their family, just the constant stress of, as their bodies are deteriorating and they're trying to maintain with such a young game, and they're trying to survive the ups and downs, and literally trying to survive because they're supporting their families and such, right? So I just remember seeing that and thinking, I don't want that. I want to have more security than that. I want to be in control of my own kind of destiny, so to speak. So I remember just kind of being very conflicted when I graduated, saying, should I pursue pro again, like my original plan, or should I take this passion project more serious? The sad thing about Country Liberty then was it wasn't self-sustaining. There was no real profits. I mean, the little bits of profits we had was just put right back into buying more inventory. And that was it. Our only expense was inventory because we had no marketing budget. We had no office space. We had nothing. A lot of it was just done out of my place, my spare bedroom. So I said, but I knew that something was real there because we were getting enough traction that it was very tempting to pursue. People were starting to be interested. This very tiny community was starting to build and establish itself. And it, and the brand showed bits of promise, just enough to kind of entertain me, interest me. into staying on task. And, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I decided not to pursue hockey again. And I decided to pursue Country Liberty. And at that point, it was a matter of, selling and doing as best as I could to just keep this business going, just keep things chugging along with the hopes that it would once, sustain my lifestyle. And it was a long time before it did. I ended up working, I supply taught, I did some freelance marketing. I was playing like semi-pro hockey, traveling to Quebec every weekend. I traveled to Rivière-du-Loup 25 weekends in a row.
Wow.
Just to make some extra cash, to pay the bills and keep things going while Country Liberty was simply chugging along. And it wasn't until, I bet you over 2 years before I was able, well, not necessarily able, but willing to take, any bit of pay from the business. So, and in that meantime, when I was at that crossroads of, should I continue on this hockey journey or continue through this business journey? My partner and I didn't really align because he wanted to continue on his career path and he didn't want to kind of, make the sacrifices in the short term and risk it to see if this business would go anywhere. Where I was a lot more confident in the mission. I was a lot more hands-on and I was a lot more just encouraged and enthused by the idea. So at that point, we had, a few pretty tense discussions, and which resulted in me buying him out. So I ended up borrowing some money, a lot more money than I was really comfortable borrowing. But at the end of the day, if you want something, you have to go after it. So that's exactly what I did. And I bought him out. And then my back was really against the wall because, I had personal debt, buying a company that wasn't really worth anything, that wasn't profiting, that couldn't sustain a salary and all those things. And I was, my back was against the wall, and it was a scary time for a while, but I was motivated. I've never been more motivated in my life because, again, here I am with this personal debt, with a business that isn't that promising, that I need to make work. Any way I looked at it, I needed to make that business work. So I just, hit the grind and just started cold calling basically everybody in the province, asking stores, asking, anybody to buy a product, to carry stuff, carry the products in their stores. And I was calling a lot of the big box stores and, I wasn't having much success. Those guys want to work with proven products. They don't want to give a new guy a start. Generally, they want to work with, brands and things that they know will sell. So I quickly realized, the big box store route was going to be very difficult for me. And through my research, I realized that there was actually, ironically, and this was kind of funny in the early days and people kind of laughed about it, was I realized a lot of Guardian, which are pharmacies, a lot of Guardians have gift shops, right? So I recognized that they had gift shops and I knew that the big box stores were turning me down. So I made a list of every single Guardian in the Maritimes, PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. I made a list on a book, just again, pen and paper, and Googled all their phone numbers. And I ended up cold calling every single one of them. And there was over 50, I'm sure, that I called.
So are they independently owned then?
Some of them are, yes. So they're independent to the extent that some owners own maybe 2 or 3 locations, but that's it. It's not like there's a headquarters in Toronto that owns all the Guardians and makes the buying decisions. And that's the key, right? Like whoever makes the buying decisions, that's who you need to get in touch with. And if it's one HQ that's doing it, it's very difficult because they're in an office in Toronto. They're not hearing about the rumblings of a little brand in New Brunswick, typically, right? So, that part was tough. So yeah, the Guardians were all independently owned, or generally speaking. But yeah, I cold called all of them. Most of them said no. I believe I got 8 or 9, maybe 10 yeses out of that process. But to me, that many stores was like hitting the jackpot because I was in the little campus store, Subtown, which we were doing, very small volume. And I was in a store here in Rexton, which is, again, a town of 800 people. So, fairly small volume. And I started calling all these stores, and Denim Warehouse and Miramichi picked us up, which was huge throughout this cold calling experience. But once I got to like 8 to 10 stores carrying the product, I started to really take myself serious. I said, wait a minute, like we actually are partnering with some locations here. This is something. And again, it took a long time, because when wholesaling, especially with very small margins, because I didn't have the product supply experience, so very thin margins, wholesaling, there's not a lot of money to be made. And at that point, there was really no money being made. However, it was showing promise because these stores were now interested, which encouraged me. And, people were coming in and asking about the brand. A lot of the stores, store owners and salesmen were educating people on the brand, and they were enjoying what they heard. And they were enjoying the brand. They were aligning to the brand, which for the first time in my short career, people were buying because of the brand, like without a doubt, because they didn't even know who I was. Where in the early days, I feel a lot of people were supporting me, and which I'm so thankful for. I feel like they knew me, or they knew a friend of a friend, or how that goes. So they were supporting for those reasons. But when we got into these stores in a lot of towns that I didn't really know anybody, and the products were still selling, I really seen some promise there. So I basically just, pumped the gas pedal, and continued to cold call stores. I got to about maybe 16, 17 stores within that like couple month span. And once I had an accumulation of these stores, then I had a bit of a bargaining chip to go to the table with the bigger box stores, right? Because now I'm sustaining 16 stores. So I went to Studio was, somebody that had turned me down a few times because I was too small, rightfully so. And I ended up, eventually just calling them back, and it became like almost a joke. Like every quarter they'd get a call from Sawyer about his brand, and it was just like kind of an ongoing joke, until one call I said, hey, and I forget the exact number, but it was 15, 16 stores. And I said, listen, like you guys have 30 stores, and we're sustaining 15, 16 stores. Like we're starting to become within your realm, is what I was, trying to communicate to those guys. Like, I'm not just selling out of my apartment anymore. We actually have some legitimacy here. And it was that point that, they said, what, let's give this guy a try. I bugged them for almost a year, or maybe even more. And, they finally let me in the door, gave me a chance, tested me in a few stores. That's how they work. They tested me in 5 stores first, passed those tests in terms of, they have like a sales recipe to dictate, if they want to continue or not. Then they tested us in 12 stores, and then they rolled us out to all their stores. And we've since became great partners, one of their best sellers in most of their locations. We have their best-selling hat of company history, tons of different achievements, that we've accomplished with those guys. They become a great partner in Studio. And, those opportunities, like it almost seemed like one opportunity led to another. We did a partnership with Moosehead Brewery earlier that year, before getting into Studio that spring. And that was the first big business that recognized us, like it was the first big company, big player, I guess, in the game that recognized us as somebody willing, like, somebody credible enough to work with, I guess, because, a lot of the perception was I'm this 23 or 4-year-old kid. I'm supposed to be a hockey player, with no business experience, with this brand he just made up. So there wasn't a lot of credibility there. And when Moosehead finally recognized me as somebody that could be valuable to partner with, that gave me a lot of confidence, but also B, the stamp of approval and that validation that I could then use, when I called Studio, hey guys, like I'm working with Moosehead, they're a big deal. They've recognized me as valuable to work with. So I'm hoping you will too. And then next came the Cavendish Beach Music Festival partnership, which essentially was the same thing. Studio validated me at this point, Moosehead validated me, and Cavendish, they called me up and they said, we don't know how we're going to make your brand fit within our plans, but we want to work with you somehow.
And,
so
and it definitely shows off, because those are partnerships that you still have going, as far as I know. And like,
yes,
these are some big like you said, Moosehead, although it is a again, it's another New Brunswick based company, but it
Yeah,
is another one of those national stamps of approval, really, that really
that's
helps
right.
bring your name forward to some
Yep,
other bigger people.
yep.
I don't want to interrupt you too much, but we do have a comment here
Sure.
that I thought might be really good for you to kind of handle at this point.
Let's do it.
So we have Megan. She says, "Hi, sir. I'm new to the whole wholesale. I have 12 accounts.
Yeah.
My company pivoted during COVID, and we are selling a new product. Do you have any advice for those starting out with wholesale and best practices for reaching out to retailers?" She loves your brand too. So
Oh, thank you very much, Megan. Yeah, so my advice, again, I can only give the advice just based on my experience. So I don't know if this is maybe the best advice, but it's certainly my advice is try to target independent retailers because independent retailers order based on their using their hearts in a lot of cases. They care about their store, the mom and pop shops. They're very emotionally attached to the work that they do, the brands that they sell, and they really, really care. And I feel, again, it's COVID, so this is tough, but I feel if you can meet them in person and just have a nice conversation with them, and if you're passionate about what you're doing, it's going to spill out of you, and they're going to recognize that, and most often they're going to enjoy that, and they're going to be drawn to that passion that's spilling out of you based on your product. So I would certainly recommend, at the very least, cold calling and having a phone conversation with the retailers that you're targeting, but even better so, trying to physically get in there and meet those guys. And also, right now, just given the pandemic, I think it's so important to be retailing online. I mean, online is where it's at, for sure. So I would certainly recommend that. But again, I know your question was more wholesale based. I'd certainly try to target independent retailers, knowing that, those guys really buy and purchase with their hearts, and just trying to, I guess, tug on those heartstrings.
awesome. Thanks, Sawyer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just saw the comment and I thought it was a really good
Yes, no,
moment
no,
just kind of
no,
talking about it.
absolutely. And for any other listener, I mean, cut me off at any point. I've discussed this story a lot. I really want to get into the Q&A because I want to, give direct value to you guys. So if anybody has a question, please, by all means, just fire it up. Very specific to business or, anything I've mentioned, or even hockey, Country Liberty, Dragon's Den, whatever you guys want to ask. Please, feel free. I encourage you guys to ask.
Absolutely. Anyway, you were talking about you kept going back to studio. They finally said yes, and the help
Yeah.
with that brands like Moosehead and
Yeah.
Cavendish Festival and sorry, it was just such an engrossing story. So I just wonder if you could
Yeah.
continue there.
Yeah. So I guess, just to kind of sum up that whole experience is when you get that validation and those stamps of approval from kind of the big dogs, there's a lot more to it than just the deal directly. And I think it's important for and what I've learned and what I do now is when looking at those partnerships, there's much more to it than just what meets the eye. You never know who's talking, you never know who's watching, and I can almost guarantee, especially if you're active on social, people are watching, and usually the people that are watching are typically in the shadows. They're the follower with like 75 followers. They're not the follower with 200,000. They're the follower, the buyer of the store that you're trying to get into, or the partnership you're trying to strike. They might be, super high up in whatever it is that they're doing, but they might not be active on social media, but they could easily be following you with like 50 followers. So it's very important to recognize, everybody is watching. The people that you're trying to get in touch with are, they're typically watching, they're always looking, so I definitely, keep that in mind. And again, the validation of those big partnerships means a lot. And there's a lot of partnerships that I won't go into detail just because I don't want to reveal anything on their end, but there's partnerships that I've entered knowing I'm not going to make money. And there's partnerships I've entered knowing I was going to lose money, like spend a lot more than I make. And, conventional business practices would suggest, that's irresponsible. But if you can afford it, sometimes it pays to get your foot in the door because, if you carry integrity with the way that you operate, these partnerships are typically not one-offs. They typically last. And if you have a long-term approach, which I had from day one with all of these guys, is I don't need to make money today. I respect making money is very important to business, but in a lot of these relationships, let's just get in the door. And that was kind of my mentality with, Cavendish and Studio and Moosehead, and, just get the foot in the door and see what happens over the course of the relationship. So that's certainly something, that I've learned there. And again, it led me to, like, I no longer work with Moosehead simply because in my world, or in the beer world brand, you can only work with one beer brand. Otherwise it's a conflict of interest. So they had a management switch, actually, so that we had disconnected just because of that. They had just kind of a different vision at the time, which was actually better for me because they were very heavily East Coast, specifically New Brunswick based, as we know, where, leaving that beer brand door open for a little while led me to working with Molson.
Yeah.
And Molson is big. They're one of the big players between, them and Labatt. They're very big players, and somebody I wanted to align with for a long time anyway, just kind of in the back of my head. And
yeah, I think of the old ads from probably when we were kids with "I am Canadian." It fits very well
right.
with Country Liberty and the values you have going on there.
Yeah, that's right. And again, I found it was such a brand alignment, and that's the key with these partnerships. The brands have to align. Like, I could want to work with Grey Goose, for example. I could want, maybe that's my favorite. It's not, but maybe that's my favorite drink, hypothetically, right? And I want to work with them, but you can't force something that doesn't come natural. And I've learned that as well. Like, I couldn't force a relationship probably with Grey Goose because there's no brand alignment. But with Molson, there is a brand alignment, which gets their team excited and gets me excited. And it just allows everything to flow naturally. I'm not adjusting my brand to fit their mold, and they're not adjusting their brand to fit my mold. It works, right? So it's very important to, again, with seeking partnerships, and anytime I seek partnerships, it's the first question I ask: what is the brand alignment here? Does this make sense? Do I need to explain this, or will people just very easily understand that these two things align? And usually, if you have to explain it, it's not an alignment. Usually people just have to understand the synergy just very casually, very naturally, So that's typically it. And again, that was just last summer. We're working on some things with Molson this year as well that I'm super crazy excited about. And then I guess, kind of the most recent surge of excitement, I guess, with the brand was, getting on Dragon's Den. And that, during a COVID year, such a strange time and experience, and everything seemed to happen so fast, just looking back now. And when I was in, I think just after I graduated, I pitched to be on Dragon's Den. And the process of Dragon's Den is these co-producers travel around the country, city to city. So for example, ours was in Fredericton the first time I went. And then, all the New Brunswick businesses that want to try to get on the show would travel into Fredericton that day, get in line, pitch, and, they might have 100 pitches a day per city. I'm not really sure, but there's certainly a lot. Then they'd go to Halifax, then they'd go, and they go right across the country, city to city, and ask that these business owners come in and pitch them. And the first time I went, I discussed my story. I talked about the hockey background. I talked about the business and the vision, and our sales numbers were actually really good at this point. But I was denied. And I was a little disappointed because I studied the show at this point, and I knew the numbers of the businesses that were getting on, number one, and also getting deals. And I really felt like my numbers were there. I felt like they were there. This, again, might have been 2 or 3 years ago. And I felt my numbers were there. And I felt the story was good, hockey and, Country Liberty, the alignment, small town New Brunswick, the whole thing. And I was a little disappointed when I got turned away. This year I found out that clothing is actually the hardest industry to get on the show with. So the producer that accepted me this time, she said, yeah, like, lucky for you, because clothing is such a hard industry to get on with, simply because, there's lots of clothing brand owners and lots of clothing based businesses, and they're making a TV show. They don't want a TV show full of clothing brands.
Mhm.
you know. And another thing too, I realize is they look for good businesses, yes, but their main concern, because again, they're producing a TV show, their main variable, I feel, they didn't tell me this directly, but I feel is whatever makes good TV, and I think that's why you see a lot of goofy things that are kind of laughable get on the show, and then you see some fantastic businesses, that are just wonderful that get on the show, because both make great TV, right? So I think my first time that I went, I was A, clothing brand, which didn't help me, but also B, I wasn't making good TV. I was very vanilla, and I'll admit that. In hindsight, I knew that it wasn't. But I am fairly vanilla when it comes to business. Like, I'm not gonna wear a goofy costume and do a presentation. That's just not who I am. So I was vanilla then, and ironically, I was vanilla again. When I went and pitched this time, the only difference was the business was quite a bit bigger. It was quite a bit, more respected. And I also had created which I should have mentioned earlier, created the Liberty Village, which is a small cabin rental resort, an extension of Country Liberty, here in Rexton, New Brunswick, where I grew up, right on the water. So they were very interested in the diversity within my business, in the sense that I said, listen, guys, they asked me, they said, why are you starting a resort? I said, 2 reasons. Well, a few reasons, but 2 or 3 main reasons. One, we have the most loyal customers. We have the best community and customer base ever. And I want to give them a physical experience to come and experience, what we're preaching here at Country Liberty, because a lot of our customers actually live in the city. They aspire the country. They love to get outside. They love to get outside the country. They like to go to cottage country. They like to go hiking. They like to go, camping, skiing, snowboard, all these outdoor activities, national parks, but they live in the city. So I said, I want to create a place that, just give them an option. If they want to come and experience a night under the stars, they can, and they can do that here with us.
So the real Country Liberty experience,
Yeah,
not
that's
just
it, right?
not just selling the clothing that feels like it, but
Exactly.
the moment, the actual feeling.
Exactly. And it was that feeling that inspired the brand in the first place. And as I mentioned earlier in the talk, the idea came before the clothing. So the passion isn't with clothing. The passion is with the idea. And that's why I extended to the Liberty Village, because I like clothing, yes, but I love this lifestyle. So any way that I can communicate or add value to this lifestyle and help build the lifestyle, I will. So I felt, Liberty Village was that. And I feel like they were interested, they were intrigued by the diversity, because again, most clothing brands, just like mine, they come out with, new seasonal products, new colors, new designs, but they really felt I was reaching outside the box with coming out with this, because there's not many clothing brands that come out with, a resort to mimic the clothing brand experience. Right. So I think the unconventionalism kind of intrigued them as well. So I'm sure that's a big reason why, I got on the show.
As you said, it makes for good television to have this key factor that's just a little bit different than everything else, right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And I can almost guarantee, in the history of Dragon's Den, there hasn't been clothing brands that go on and also build little small resorts either, right? So it was just a unique, and like you said, yeah, it makes good television. So I got the call. It was COVID, so I was sitting in my office. My entire office building was closed. I was the only one here. And I got a Zoom call. They said, hey, we want to interview you. It's the next step of the evaluation. So I said, yeah, sure, of course, no problem, right? So I was all nervous, and I had my water bottle and made sure the room was clean behind me, and I was ready for this interview, had my notes and everything, right? And they said, we're not actually interviewing you. We just wanted to tell you that you're going to be on the show. So that was their way of breaking me the news. They wanted to screen record my reaction, which I was so robotically prepared for this interview. There was no reaction, because I was still in focus mode. I wasn't in casual, let's have fun mode.
It was, I'm ready to pitch this to somebody.
I'm ready to sell.
Right now.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know what it's like, right?
Absolutely. And actually, that actually brings up a real good comment that we have here from somebody else's right now. So it says, how did you practice your pitch? And do you have any tips for those just participate in the Apex elevator pitch competition?
Yes, I do. So my very first pitching experience was at that competition.
Nice.
Okay. It was, what a practice that was. It was perfect practice for what you'd experience on Dragon's Den. So, and I only did it my last year university, but my advice would be to take part in that pitch competition every year if you're serious about business, and other pitch competitions as well. Because there's actually money to be made. There's cash to be made by attending at these pitch competitions.
Shameless plug for a moment, just real quickly. We actually also have a pitch competition coming up as well. So
really,
the student pitch competition here at the center is another pitch competition that you could, especially if you guys have taken part in Apex. This is coming up here really soon, so this is another good step to pitch your idea and talk about what you're actually going through. Anyway, sorry, just had to talk about it as you're talking about other pitch competitions.
No, absolutely. The elevator pitch was very different than my actual presentation. The elevator pitch is something I memorized line for line, right? Because it's 60 seconds. I studied it. I could read it in my sleep, I did longer pitches of 2 or 3 minutes that was a little too long to memorize. But in terms of, Dragon's Den things, they actually give you 1 minute, exclusively 1 minute of the dragons. They're not allowed to interrupt. Okay. So you're guaranteed 60 seconds, which again, similar to an elevator pitch. 60 seconds is your guarantee that they won't interrupt. And if you have them captivated, you might get more time. So I had about 2 minutes total just because, it just worked out that way. But the only guarantee was 60 seconds. So I built a lot of my presentation around the first 60 seconds. And then I had a bit of if they give me more time kind of section, which was another 60. So I ended up getting through my full 2 minutes, the full pitch, which I'm very thankful for, because I got, all the information communicated I was hoping. But I mean, the Apex is a great practice. And I would recommend, just back to the question, I would recommend doing as many pitch competitions as you can, getting the practice, and just simply knowing your stuff. I mean, it's similar to a class presentation. When someone goes up at the front of the room and they don't know what, they're not prepared, right? Or when someone goes up at the front of the room and they are prepared. And what I'll say about pitching is sometimes the variables are different. Like when I went to Dragon's Den, it was a huge room. On TV, it looks small. It's massive. I was at the studio because I was the first pitch of the day at 7 a.m. So not everybody's a morning person that's ready to kill at 7 o'clock in the morning, but you have to be. So a lot of these variables are out of your control. When I got there, there was 2 hours of me sitting in a chair waiting. So my mind was just racing. I'm double guessing if I should say this, if I should do that. How do I look? What am I doing? What are they going to think of me? All these things racing through your head. So what allowed me to be, successful was I knew my presentation through and through. No matter what variable they would throw at me, I knew my pitch so well and my numbers and everything so well that it doesn't matter. A car could drive right through the studio and it wouldn't allow me to lose course just because I knew it so well, just based on practicing so often, practicing in the mirror, practicing driving. I would practice. I would say it out loud. I would go through a 20-minute presentation as I drove just by myself. And also anticipating the questions. I studied the show, so I knew what not to say, which is almost as important as what to say. And then again, I knew what to say and I knew how to answer questions, and I anticipated, and I looked at my business from the outside looking in. I said, every business has different vulnerabilities. Mine is no exception to that. And I said, they're dragons. It's their job to find the vulnerabilities and bring them up to you on national TV and try to corner you and see how you react. Because a lot of what they're doing is testing you, right? They're testing to see if this entrepreneur is quick on their feet. So I basically wrote down tons of questions that were asked on the show, and I tried to anticipate any kind of vulnerabilities that they would identify within my business. And I come up with the best answers I could for those questions. And just went from there.
So this is a question I have. This is a personal question. Did you leave any holes in your in hopes that they would go after them?
I did, absolutely. I tried to lead them in directions to ask me questions. What's a good example? Well, the sales. I mean, I didn't mention my sales until they asked. And then I was able to impress them with the question, right? So there's some pieces of information that are better off. Here's a good example. On the show, I told them that I was drafted to the NHL, but when I meet anybody, that's not something I ever mention. But if they find it out, like a store owner finds that out about me, they're going to be really happily impressed versus if I'm just jamming that information down their throat, right? So depending on what it is, it's kind of nice to lead them down the road to asking the question, because there's more value if they didn't, if they think, well, geez, maybe he was going to leave that out. You know, it makes them question versus you just jamming information down their throat. So yeah, I mean, there was certainly some. I wish I could think of one off the top of my head, but yeah, that was definitely part of my strategy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. It seemed like a really good moment as you're talking about waiting on that Zoom call, being ready to pitch. I figured that was a real good moment to talk about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And really that brings me kind of to the end of, I guess the context that I wanted to share. So if you or anybody else has questions, I mean, I'd love to answer them. And again, if it seems like Dragon's Den seems to be a theme, you know, I can answer some Dragon's Den questions or, you know, whatever you kind of have in mind.
Absolutely. So, just a reminder, if you have any questions for Sawyer, please place them here in the comments. We will, like I've been bringing them up as we go along, so we'd be really happy to talk about any of these moments. I've got a few questions here, so maybe we'll talk about a couple of these just as we're waiting for some comments to come through. Some of these you've honestly answered a few of them, so I'm going to take one that's really more nitty gritty, and we're going to talk about product shots because that's something I feel like you've got a lot of experience in. So what are some of your tips for getting an amazing product shot?
Yeah. So, back in the bootstrapping days, I actually bought a camera. I hired out a couple photo shoots, realized how expensive it was. Okay. So if you are starting a business, it's very important to monitor those expenses, right? So I realized, hey, if I buy a camera and learn the art myself, I'll save a lot of money. So that's basically what I did. And what I realized with that was it also connected me best with the community as well, right? Because I was there in real time. Like I was in the trenches and I was, you know, which was great, but also it taught me the art and it gave me an appreciation for those that are doing the art as well. So now I don't do as much shooting as I did originally, but I have a real appreciation for the artists that do. And just by being within that kind of network, I was able to meet these photographers in a very natural way. And those are the same guys that I'm working with now consistently, guys and gals that I'm working with consistently now. So I think a lot of content creation is relationship building, you know, meeting different people and things like that. And then just simply looking and seeing what other people are doing. Like I, you know, learned a lot on Instagram in terms of styling and just looking at what people are doing and then going out and trying to do it myself and figuring out how they did it, how they got things a certain way. So I think that, you know, when creating content, you know, it's great to align with people that are already creating the content. And it's also great to just kind of keep an eye open and see what everybody else is doing, because at the end of the day, you know, a beautiful lifestyle product, like, and more relevant to my brand, because we're very outdoorsy. A lot of our content is based on the outdoors, you know, a very in action lifestyle shot of the product generally sells better than just a product on a table. And I've actually experimented with retailers where it's like I send an iPhone banger of a new item just on my desk, or I go out and shoot professionally and edit and send them that same photo, and their reaction to that product is very different from just the iPhone banger to the professional shot, you know? So the visuals are very important.
Awesome. So we've got quite a few questions that just popped in. So I'll start at the top here. So we've got Bernadette who is asking, what is your international growth strategy for right now?
Yeah. So as of right now, international growth strategy would simply be, I'm looking to grow online as best I can. There is no real retail play internationally. Yet. I'm really, my ambition is really to get across the country first. See what that brings us. There's a lot to be said about being, you know, a Canadian brand and you know, having awareness directly across the country, especially where that's what inspired this. And then I would look eventually, this is probably a much longer plan, to go south of the border first. You know, we have a trademark in the United States. We sell some online in the States as well. But in terms of retail, I'd probably like to go down to the States where I feel, you know, there's a lot of brand alignment in some of those pockets as well. But in terms of international outside of North America, there is really, to be honest, no plan in motion there.
Awesome. Okay. Again, we're getting questions popping in a bunch now. So
Good.
we've got another one here. It's how did you arrange your brand deal with the Rishabukto Winery?
So the brand deal with the Rishabukto Winery, just like a lot of other kind of deals, they just kind of form naturally. Like my advice would be to work on your brand or whatever you're working on and build it to be the best that it can be, and awareness will be brought, and then a lot of these partnerships will just kind of arrive on your doorstep. So what happened there was I realized the value that they would bring, they realized the value that I would bring. So the conversation just started, and that was simply how that happens. A partnership like that in the early days would have never worked because I wouldn't have provided them enough value for that partnership, right? So the key to partnerships is equal value being traded, whether that's dollars, whether that's promotion, whether that's content. I have all different types of partnerships, but the key to a successful partnership is you're giving them equal value to they're giving you versus just they have something I want, so I'm going to go ask for it. That typically doesn't work. It's more so, what can I give to you and what can they give to me? And furthermore, I usually start my pitches with what I can do for them. That's usually how it works versus, hey, this is what I want from you, type of mentality.
Awesome. That's a great way to start any pitch, especially when it comes to any partnership with
Yes,
anyone.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, we got another question here from Xavier that says, "How do you prioritize expansion in different regions while assuring you keep your brand integrity, awareness, and quality?"
Yeah. So for me, being a country lifestyle brand, it's fairly easy to see the pockets that you want to target. I'm not looking to be downtown Toronto ever, but one day when I expand in Ontario, I hope to be in Muskoka, for example, so you just kind of know where your brand fits. So I think it's important to recognize that because, yeah, everybody wants to be selling downtown New York, but if your brand doesn't fit, it's not going to have success, right? So you need to, I think, be real about where your brand's going to truly fit. And also integrity and product integrity and things like that's so important because it's your brand, right? So it's very important to monitor that and have control over that. You have to have legal control over that, and you need to be the distributor, or you need to have legal contracts with suppliers and things that in place that protects the integrity of your brand. So two very important things to be mindful of, I guess, is, again, just to go back to the question, is keep in mind where your brand's going to align when you want to expand, and where it won't align, where you'll best set it up for success, and also control the integrity and the quality, and be very fussy with your product and your standards.
Awesome. Okay, got another one here. Sorry, we're doing great with questions right now. So this one says, "How do you manage your inventory, ordering more of one thing versus another, etc.?"
So this is something that I took a long time to learn. A lot of it was intuitive in the early days, just because I wasn't the most organized person and I was learning. So essentially, I would just feel it out, like what was popular, what was popping. And generally speaking, I mean, you don't stop something that's selling, right? I mean, just rule of thumb, typically, unless it's within your marketing strategy, like some of the big brands do, but that's not me. If something's selling, I continue to stock it, until all of a sudden it kind of stops selling. But in the last, 2 or 3 years, I have inventory reports based on my wholesale site that can tell me exactly how many black hats I sold last year. Okay. So for example, I did all my hat ordering for this summer already, and I pulled sales reports and said, okay, how many black hats, for example, did I sell last year? I need to order at least that and maybe more. Now, if it's a product that might be out of style next year, I'd have a different conversation with myself. But for the staple products, the charcoal hoodie, the red buffalo plaid fleece, like just the staples of the line, I look at last year's sales reports typically, and I say, okay, I sold whatever X amount of pieces of that item. I'm going to order that, and then if I feel we'll sell even more, maybe I'll order 30% more than last year. Or if I feel, well, that product might be out of style this year, maybe I'll order 20% less. But the base of that decision is based on last year's sales.
Just watching the trends and data analysis.
Yeah, exactly. And Instagram is such a wonderful tool because, especially being out here on the East Coast, like the trends hit us later. So, if I watch what's happening in BC now, I'll know next year it'll be here kind of mentality, give or take. So it's, Instagram's such a great tool for identifying the trends in different parts of the world, and those trend setting pockets like your LA, your London, your BC, your New York, those pockets of the world. It's such a great resource.
Awesome. So I've got one more question here, and I think we're running out of time, so this will be the last one for on our side. It says,
Yeah.
how do you feel your personal brand plays in part in the Country Liberty brand, or vice versa? And
Yeah.
they say they're a big fan of you and your company, so there's
Oh,
that as well. So it's from Ryan.
thank you very much, Ryan. That's really rewarding to hear. I don't know, to be honest. There's no real strategy there between personal brand and my business. I just know that personal brand's important because it's personal brand, which is essentially just reputation. It's just a new word for reputation, but it's important, because people want to support people that they like, or people that they respect, or people that they know. So naturally I'm a pretty social person, and I just really enjoy putting myself out there anyway. But I think that it does help because a lot of the big brands that don't have a face to their company, it's hard to connect with them, where you guys know. I mean, I live in a town of 800 people. I'm just like anybody else. That, there's no differences between myself and Ryan or yourself, or, we're all the same. Where if we look at, a different brand without a face, it's like, who is running that company? Like, what is that person like? So I feel like it humanizes the Country Liberty brand, but it also allows people to realize, like, none of us are any different. We all put our boots on in the morning and go to work. I just happen to sell clothing and have a clothing brand, and you guys happen to just do something else. That's really the only difference.
Awesome. So again, that would be the last question for today, just because we are running out of time. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and thank you for joining us today, Sawyer. It's been a real great time talking with you.
Yes, thank you. I had a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I hope today's show was helpful for all of you out there watching on your entrepreneurial journey. If you have any questions about any of our programs, for example, the student pitch competition is coming up, and I have a date now, so it's on March 24th coming up. So if you guys want to practice your pitches, there's another opportunity to do that coming up. Or if you have any questions for our speaker, because it seems like there were a lot of questions out there, feel free to send us a message on Facebook or email us at tme@unb.ca. Also, make sure to check out Country Liberty at countryliberty.ca. So again, thank you so much, Sawyer, for joining us and sharing your story. So next week we have another East Coaster who ended up in front of the Dragons joining us. We have the CEO of Vertiball, Curtis Kennedy. So tune in next week to hear about his experiences in growing his company here on the East Coast, and the journey that resulted in his pitch as well to the Dragons. It seems to be our theme for the next couple of for the last 2 weeks. So thank you all again for tuning in to our RBC Lunch and Learn presented by the J. Herbert Smith Center, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you.